For the rest of our lives, we'll no doubt remember the impact COVID has had on our families, our country, even our world. Some of the scars will be easy to see, such as empty stores that were put out of business. But as Ava reports, some scars are not as obvious.
There's an old rhyme that starts, "Sticks and stones may,"
break my bones.
but words will never hurt me.
but that's not necessarily true. Words can hurt, a lot. And this brings us back to COVID. The world first heard about it when the outbreak was reported in the Chinese city of Wuhan. That led some of our government leaders to call it the Chinese virus, and that's had an unfortunate effect. Asian Americans have found themselves not just the targets of nasty names, but physical attacks. Some of them deadly. Pure and simple, these are hate crimes. They're part of what is called anti-AAPI discrimination. The AAPI stands for Asian American Pacific Islander. To learn more about this, we're speaking with Carolyn Kang. In addition to being an actor appearing in programs on HBO Max and Amazon Prime, she's also a filmmaker and an activist. You grew up in New York City. Before COVID, had you always felt safe?
Yeah, I grew up in New York City, and prior to COVID, I felt really comfortable and safe taking the subway. I would take the subway every day to go to high school, for example, and I felt super safe commuting every single day.
But then you had a frightening and ugly experience on the subway. What happened?
Yeah, in 2020, a few months after the pandemic started, I was riding the subway one day in an almost empty car, and a man approached me, gesturing violently towards me, and started screaming in my face that Chinese people were ruining this country and that I was to blame for COVID.
That must have been terrifying. How did that affect you?
It felt terrifying in the moment. And after that, I was pretty scared of taking the subway. I avoided it for many months, take the walking or taking mopeds or simply, calling Ubers if I had to go anywhere. But really, I felt really unsafe even just walking down the street.
And sadly, that's not the only experience you've had.
It's not, unfortunately. In late 2021, I was attacked again. I was walking on the street when I walked past two men. One of them, out of nowhere, punched me in the arm. I was physically okay, but very shaken up, as you can imagine. And they proceeded to scream made up Asian words at me. And I just started walking away very quickly. And the whole experience just really shook me up. And I was exhausted, I was fearful, and really angry that this kept on happening.
It is certainly angering. To be clear, Carolyn's experiences weren't just rare, isolated incidents. In the past year, anti-Asian hate crime increased by more than 300%. In just 12 months, more than 6,000 incidents have been reported. And the police are quick to point out that many attacks, whether verbal or physical, go unreported. Carolyn, why do you think this hate exists?
I think this hate exists because of two reasons. One, I think that it comes from a place of fear. I think when people are fearful or there are unknowns, they tend to place blame on certain groups of people when there's something that they don't understand. And I think that it also comes from a place of ignorance about the science of how the virus works, how it's transmitted. And there's also a lot of politicians who will call COVID-19 the Chinese virus, which really places a target on the backs of AAPI folks in this country.
So you decided to take action, didn't you?
I did. So after that happened, and after I was seeing all these news reports of anti-Asian hate crimes that were happening in New York and all over the country, I decided to launch a campaign of distributing free safety alarms to AAPI folks in New York City. So there are these little safety alarms. When you pull the alarm, it actually emits a loud piercing sound to alert bystanders and to deter the attacker.
How many keychain alarms have you given away so far?
So far, we have raised around $10,000 and we have distributed, I believe, close to 1,800 safety alarms all across the city.
Have you gotten any feedback on how helpful they've been?
I have, and that's been really rewarding. I've had emails come in from a lot of students who are commuting or nurses who are working on the front lines. And people have reached out to me and said that they just feel that much safer having the alarm with them in their pockets as they're commuting to work or walking on the street.
It's great that the alarms are helping people. Now, in addition to standing up against racism and hate, as we mentioned, you're also an actress. And in the TV series, Awkwafina is Nora from Queens. You ironically play the part of a teen bully.
I do.
What can the rest of us do to fight bullying and hate in all its forms?
I think that one thing that we can all do is to be an active bystander. If you come across someone being bullied, someone being called names, or someone being physically attacked, of course, with caution in those situations. But if you see something, don't be afraid to be an active bystander and step in when necessary because we have to protect each other, you know?
Good advice. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
This is not the first time Asian Americans have been victimized by fear and anger. During World War II, after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, the federal government enacted a shameful policy.
Notices were posted. All persons of Japanese descent were required to register.
It gave thousands of Americans of Japanese descent only a few days to sell their businesses and their homes. The government then forced them to live behind barbed wire in internment camps. Most of these were U.S. citizens. Many didn't even speak a word of Japanese or ever visited Japan. They were Americans, but they were victimized by racism. It took 50 years for the U.S. government to apologize to Japanese Americans. In 1991, President George H.W. Bush signed a formal apology saying, "The internment of Americans of Japanese ancestry was a great injustice and it will never be repeated." While we're not talking about rounding up Asian Americans because of coronavirus, we do need to guard against other forms of injustice. No one should live in fear of their safety. So keep in mind that it's not just sticks and stones, but words that can truly do harm. For Teen Kids News, I'm Ava.